Welcome to today's Skill Up session. My name is Emily Sprenger, and I'm joined by one of my most favorite people at National University, Dr. Stone Meredith. And Dr. Meredith joined us for a part one session of today's topic. So I will send that out as just a follow-up in our email. As a brief reminder to all of the participants in the space, let's remain muted unless called upon just for the best flow of today's presentation. And then I am helping Dr. Meredith by driving the PowerPoint presentation. So if you happen to put something in the chat and I don't get to you right away, just please know it's because I am sharing my screen, so multitasking a little bit there. So hang tight with me. And does my items that I want to cover at the top of the hour, Dr. Meredith, and I know you have quite a bit to share with us today, so I'm going to turn it right on over to you. If you need me, I'll find me in the chat, okay?
Sounds great. And here we go. I'm going to go real fast. We have a lot to talk about because AI is real important. I'm just kidding, everybody. But it does kind of feel like that, right? I mean, I was saying to Emily, everybody I talk to has kind of a different answer. And so, as y'all know, my name is Stone, and I go by Dr. Meredith when I'm teaching, right? And I teach it in a lot of ways. At National, I want to make it very clear that I teach undergrads and graduate students. So I'm seeing kind of the beginning, middle, and end. I teach my favorite things to teach are the willing, right? But I see a lot of new folks. So we have this class called English 102, and it's going to be a mix of a lot of folks, a lot of military, which I like. My husband's retired Air Force. The diversity of the population is really unbelievable here, which what drew me here. But what we see is a lot of diversity in experience and age. If you're familiar with our Anders campaigns, we do have a lot of Anders. I'm working and learning and coaching soccer and, but we also do have a lot of young people, and then we have a lot of older people who have already ended. And so we have a pretty diverse population in those early classes. And we have a really diverse population in the graduate class that I teach regularly, which is where I really focus a lot on AI. And that's a class called The History of Rhetoric. And it's up in the 600s with those nosebleed classes, as I like to call them. And I see a diverse population there. But in general, y'all, who I'm teaching is they're working educators who are working on a master's degree. And so for the most part, I would say 85-90% of those students are working educators who are getting a master's degree so they can teach dual enrollment. So think about that. They've been out there for a while. They're seeing the Zers and the alphas and the younger people, but they're also coming back into traditional academia and working with others who are not. So that's a real interesting group of folks too, right? So know that I'm kind of speaking as someone who works with all those populations. And I can tell you that in my experience, there are two kind of AI users. Those who admit to it and those who lie to me, like I'm somebody's mother, caught them coming in home late from the party. And so today, you don't have to admit or to lie. See, that mute button looks pretty good, doesn't it? So we're not going to talk about who does or who doesn't. We're going to assume into evidence that AI is part of the academic culture. And we're going to move on to the next slide and get started. Thank you, Emily. So we're going to define the meal plan. I don't know if anybody on here saw the last video, but if you didn't, after this is over, you're going to want to go watch it because that's where I really break down what main idea, citing evidence, connecting the main idea with analysis, and then a link to the next paragraph is all about in detail. But y'all are grown and bright, so you can probably catch on today anyway. We're going to talk about how and when we're going to talk about how and when AI can or should be used or tracked there and look at next steps and resources. All right, next one. All right, don't panic. This is a lot. So we're going to look at two videos very quickly, and I want you to think of them as kind of both sides of the coin. The first one is a TA, a teaching assistant. And honey, like I said to Emily, I wish we had the fella who was making his coffee because it is working. And the second one is a little more mainstream, and it's a look at what CBS News in the morning. You're waking up and you have regular people coffee, and you don't want to be too flipped out. But we are going to take a little bit of a look at these videos so that you can see kind of the context of where the culture is. But Emily, before we click the first video, I want to set our pedagogy here, our way of learning and working together. We do not live in fear at National. It's just not how we do business. And so that's how Emily and I got together on this. We're having an open conversation about AI and tracking the usage. And after we watch these videos, and of course, you'll get these handouts and the links to them later. After we watch a little bit of the videos, we're going to go and show you how and why you don't have to live in fear. So, Emily, if you would, let's go to our first little fella. Y'all, he's having a day. And again, this will all be sent out to you and you'll have an opportunity to look at it. But I want to make a point here, and I'm going to tell y'all some gossip. So now we've seen if you're using AI, there's a TA or a teacher or a technology out there that's looking at you using AI, right? And this is what always happens, isn't it? I don't know if anybody in here is old enough to remember when Wikipedia came out and all those kind of things. And I was a TA back then. We were just getting electricity. And so we would go in there and I would take my students and I'd say, let me show you how quickly you can make Wikipedia. I was teaching them Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Zora Neale Hurston back in the days when we still taught literature by the author. And we would go in there and just make up the craziest stuff. And Lord, the next day it would be there. And then we'd go in there and change it again. And then it'd be changed again the next day. And the world was going to end. And those were in the days when people would turn in papers to me, and people who were maybe first gen or who had not been exposed to a lot of technology would turn in this paper about the postmodern deconstruction of the relevance. They're 18 years old from Tampa, Florida, and they would forget to cut the bottom of the paper off that had the web address because they were so new to technology. Anybody remember those days, early 2000s? That was going to be the end of the universe. And you want to hear a funny story? That same TA, except back then we wore our hats forward and they were like this. That same TA was saying those same things. And Microsoft and teachers and principals and everybody was doing their little hair and coming out and saying the same thing back then. But I'm going to tell you some gossip, okay? And I have it from a good source because I teach it every semester. So a long time ago, this fellow was running a school and he had all these little children taking down and writing notes about what was going on. Well, everybody got a little tired of him, and different leaders came and went and went and came, and some leaders liked this fella and some leaders didn't. And before you know it, he was kind of long and forgotten in his little school. Honey, they came in and took it over and had those boys in there learning, doing God knows what. And he was forgotten for a little while. But while he was there, he'd had those little students writing down everything they did. And he said, y'all, you don't know what they're going to do to me. They killed the guy before me because of his big old fat mouth. I want you to do everything you can do to make sure that no matter what happens at this little schoolhouse or to me, that if somebody finds the stuff we did together, it's going to live on. So they said, okay, Professor Plato, we will do that. We will write down on this day, on the 23rd of September, when Emily had her hair braided and Stone had hers down, and Terrence was taking notes, and Mark was nice enough to smile and care enough to pay attention. And it was clear in Washington, D.C. Those little boys, because they didn't let little girls do it back then, those little boys wrote down everything they could think of to write in those notes just in case the worst happened. And I think, spoiler alert, if you've not finished watching your latest documentary, Grease Falls, and a lot of what Plato said goes with it. But over the millennia, over the centuries, we find fragments and relics of what Plato said, and we can verify them because of what he told those little boys to do about Emily's braid and Mark paying attention and all of those little details in the note. You want to hear the funny part about it? Not maybe 5 years before he started making them do that, he wrote all these stories. They called them dialogues, where he would imagine this character, Socrates, who, you know, and everybody knew who Socrates was, right? He was like the Frank Sinatra, for these kids or whatever. Everybody knew who he was. He was worried about people writing things down. So Plato himself, the guy who made it possible to teach us how to read and write and take notes the way I'm going to show you, because this comes from his academy, Plato himself was writing things like the Phaedrus and Gorgias, and you can Google them all, free text, right? They're all out of copyright. Plato himself was saying, y'all, I don't think we ought to write everything down because I think our brains are going to get whacked out. And what if you write down what I said and I'm not there to defend myself and it's misunderstood? Y'all, we shouldn't be writing everything down. This technology is dangerous. Then, but as luck would have it, and here's the gossip, it was people writing things down that saved his ideas. So, as we move forward, my big takeaway for you is never forget the irony in artificial intelligence. My grandmother used to call it an oxymoron when people would say we're going to have a big time in the big city, because she'd say there ain't no such a thing. I want you to think about artificial and intelligence next to each other. And what does that mean to you? And what does that have to do with the real gossip that's the real truth about Plato? The very guy who said, y'all better quit writing that stuff down, somebody's going to come get you. And they did come get him. And they did the same thing to Cicero in ancient Rome a few hundred years later. That same guy, I can just sit here and gossip about him because people wrote stuff down. So, what is the irony of that? The very AI that we're running away from and trying to learn and trying to be afraid of and trying to whatever, honey, it's already here, just like those tablets in Plato's time. It's going to be here. It's going to impact us. And for whatever reason, y'all aren't the soccer coach or the soccer snack person this semester. You're the student, just like Plato's students were the students. So for whatever reason, it's none of my business, but I bet I can guess because all graduate students have a lot of things in common on why they're here. For whatever reason, you've put yourself in the position of those students of Plato's, and it's your responsibility now, by virtue of the fact that you're sitting here, to decide what this technology says about our future. Point number one. Point number two, which is the real so what, is you're also here to decide how much you get out of this education. And anybody who tells you that you can't use AI to get through your classwork is telling you a story, honey. Not true gossip like I did, but fake gossip like they do sometimes on Bravo late night, okay? You can get through all your coursework if you're real clever. That TA just showed you how to get away from getting caught using that one program. You can spend all your time trying to figure out how to let AI do it for you. But here's the problem. What if somebody asks you a question and you can't use your phone? We're going to be right back where Plato started, aren't we? He was afraid you'd write it all down and then you wouldn't be able to read it and say the answer. Again, big time in the big city, kind of an oxymoron, right? Artificial intelligence. You determine and define what intelligence means, and we're going to talk about how we do it on the next slide, Emily. Okay, can we pop over real quick to look at our resources? We're getting close to the meal plan, y'all, and I'm actually 4 minutes under schedule, so no worries. Does everybody know our Academic Success Center? Because if you do, you have Emily to thank for a lot of it. And if you don't, let's get to know it. And I'm not going to go through all these because I've already made my point, I think. But if we could look at that second one, ethical use of AI learning, I think this is what our audience really wants to focus on. And I'm going to sum it up for you in my own words, and that does not negate your opportunity to go look at it. When you're using AI, we need to know it. Not because we're going to get that TA to come in, but because we can't help you if we don't know it. And so every policy is different. As you can imagine, knock yourself out in my class because I want to talk to you about it. Can you imagine telling teachers they can't use it and then playing that little game? But we want to know it. The review of the syllabus is on here. If it's the faculty member doesn't say no AI, whatever they say, in my opinion, and this is my opinion as a faculty member who's been here since Lassie was a puppy, honey, I would go and say, this is what I'm doing. I've been to this session. I've looked at these resources. This is where I am, and this is how I'm trying to get there. First day of class. I know I appreciate it. And when you get to those later phases of your PhD process, it needs to be right out of the gate. It needs to be right out of the gate. You know, I always think of the example that really clicked for some young women I was working with in one of those big cities. And I said, would y'all think that my pocketbook was as cool as it is if you knew it was a fake? And they said, yeah, but we just want you to tell us it was a fake. And I said, well, A, it's not because my son got it for me. But B, you get the point. Fake or real pocketbook, just be honest with me when you, hey, I like your purse. Thanks, my son bought it for me. It's real. Thanks, I got it on Canal Street. It's fake. Why does it matter? Well, I'll tell Mark's like, I don't even know where Canal Street is, and I know I'm not going now, but I can tell you why it matters because I was honest with you. I was honest with you. And so once you know who I am and how I shop, you can help me get my next bag. You see the metaphor here. Okay, so we see the best practices, and while we're here, you also see student faculty use guidelines, AI tools, video, and AI literacy. And what I really liked about that CBS piece is that that literacy piece is changing. And so if you follow that guy on Instagram, which I'm not endorsing one way or the other, he comes on several times a week and he's always found something new. So the AI literacy piece changes. I would say, according to some younger colleagues of mine who work in that field at the University of Florida, they're updating about every 48 to 72 hours on what AI literacy means. So go early and go often on that piece. How do you use AI? Well, again, that's between you and your God and your professor for right now. Right now, let's move on and talk about some things that I know will work with the meal plan, and we'll go from there. Okay, so what is the meal plan? Well, to be honest with you, it's something that I just kind of made up when I worked at Hillsborough Community College right after 9/11. And one of my precious students, who is just amazing, and she's now a principal. And at the time, she was failing English for the second time. And she said, okay, so it spells meal. Meal is how you write papers. And I said, yeah, it is. So, anyway, main idea, cited evidence, analysis, and link. So main idea, cited evidence, analysis, and link as needed for those of you writing in APA format. If anyone is not writing in APA format, the link piece changes by the style. So for example, some historians almost always want the link. Some literature, literary societies, things like that almost always want the link. So it's not a blanket statement, but in general, especially for the degrees that we offer here, the link is if it's your bag, if it's your voice, you know what I say when I mean voice, if that's what comes out of you. And I'll tell you where we see the link a lot. Certain type of military writing will almost always have the link because it's a form they've used. So quartermaster type of work has a lot of link. Whereas maybe people who are different types of protocols in the military do not. Nurses tend to have a link because they've learned subjective, objective, appraisal, procedure. So it's hard to beat them to quit putting procedure where the link should go. So a lot of it's going to depend on your writing background, is my point. Business, if you're just like straight business, they're probably not going to want the link except at the end of the section. Okay? Psychology is not going to want the link except when you're tying together controversial ideas. So you hear what I'm saying about the link piece, but the main idea, evidence, and analysis hasn't changed really since Socrates, although Plato put it on the map, right? Plato and Socrates put it on the map. It's really just that same basic way of sharing critical thinking. Okay. So, why do I say something to you? Why do I say something to Julie? Well, maybe I don't want to listen to the teacher anymore, and Julie looks like she might go off the map with me. Maybe I need somebody to do something for me. But whatever reason you say something or make an action or look at somebody, you're doing it for a reason. That's why humans communicate. This genre has a very specific pattern. For example, studies show blah, 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 blah. So we can see from my topic sentence and my made up example that it's important to tie the main idea and the evidence together. That's what the meal plan sounds like. My one that I use with my early students, cars are important to the American society. In fact, a 2002 study showed that 1 in 2 American dollars touched the auto industry in a 10-year time period. Therefore, basic financial data shows us how cars actually underpin the American culture. That's what the paragraph plan sounds like. Didn't hear a link in there, did you? And it all depends on you. What's really important is the first word, your own main idea, your original contribution. Why did I write it that way? Let's go to the next slide and take a look, Emily. Because it's about critical thinking, critical reading, and tracking growth. And so it takes a lot at our level to get to the point where you're writing a paragraph. When you're writing a paragraph, it's almost like it's the wrap up after a session. If you've worked on a project and you have a debrief, in all honesty, that's what the writing part is. That's what the paragraph plan is. That's what the paper for the class is. It is the debrief of what you've learned, what you've been taught. Okay. But at our level, really, we're learning what's put in front of it. And why are we doing that at the graduate level? Because we're trying to create new knowledge. We didn't just invite you here because you look cool, although you do. We invited you here because your field can only survive with new knowledge, and you agreed to come in and give us some. That's the model Plato set up and the model that has survived in Western culture. Hats off to Jefferson, Franklin, and Payne as we come up on the big anniversary next year. So, this critical thinking, critical reading, and tracking growth, all that stuff really began when you said, I want to go to graduate school and major in blank. You funneled it down a little bit more. I'm going to take these classes. You funneled it down a little bit more. I'm going to write my dissertation on blank. But in the brain, and this comes from linguistics, and much, if you know people like Saussure and some of the early guys, but all the way through the people who are reading and writing and linguistics has gone more kind of into like the ideas of like neurosciences, right? They've taken over kind of our language work. But we know this from work even going on in neurology and neuropsychology today. The minute you put an idea into a literate person's brain, a process of critical thinking that can produce writing begins because we learn it as children. And the more fluent you are in a language, the faster the process is triggered. The minute there's the potential that you could be asked to do critical thinking and produce a project. And I would argue that our Anders and our national students are really kind of at the forefront of that because we have so many people who are working professionals, people who have experience. And research shows us that the more you do that, the faster the potential for your writing process has been activated. Okay, we'll hop on to the next one, Emily. Okay, and I know text heavy, but I want you to take it with you. And so if you saw the last one, or if you look at the last one, it looks very similar. Thinking in the meal plan makes it easier to read academic writing. I want to pause here for a second. AI can go out and it can read everything in the field for you in an evening. Okay? But what's the trick? Tell me what's important in my field. Why is that a bad question? Because you don't know the rubric it's using. And here's the other problem. You don't know what the last guy on that large language model told it to do, but whoever said anything close to it last, and obviously I mean said as a metaphor, right? Said anything close to it last is going to drive that rubric of what that thing gives you back. So AI is built on large language models. They're not all the same. There's not one large language model where they're like, here's AI, and Julie got hers from Gemini, and April got hers from Chat GPT, and that's why they're different. Things go into that. Who uses it? What did they ask it? What language models were introduced? What resources was it given access to? All those kinds of things really matter. As a matter of fact, for Rocky Mountain College English Association, for a paper I presented there in June or July, I put in a question about Plato at the beginning of my paper. At the end, we put in a different question and we got different answers. So AI's whole job is to always get better, always know more, always get faster. But again, who's defining better? Well, if you're using it, honey, it better be you. So if you say, tell me everything I need to know about Susie's article, I'm just going to tell you this right now. I don't know that Emily's going to love, I'm telling you, but you should go into the question your teacher asked you and look for the verbs. Compare and contrast Emily's article on her great dissertation she just defended without even breaking a sweat. That might be what you would say, okay? Because she did. Okay? Compare and contrast it. Okay, well, I mean, that'll get you a little closer, won't it? Because at least you've asked it to do something the way the teacher asked you to do. But again, you're going to get stuff all over the place. And that's what students say. I got so frustrated. And that's what teachers in that CBS story probably are saying. I got so frustrated because I asked it stuff and it told me the craziest stuff you ever heard of because you didn't ask it from your own critical thought. Compare and contrast the specifics of marketing in companies the size of so and so where I work on blah, 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 blah. Okay, now you've given AI a rubric. So the same way the teacher says, this is the rubric I'm going to use to grade you. So you say, okay, so I'm going to write to hit these goals and write within these parameters. Imagine AI sitting there doing that to you going, okay, come on, Joyce, come on. Tell me how you're going to grade me and evaluate me, and I'll do a whole lot better on your test. So when you go into this idea of how do I start, how do I use it, is it worth my time? If you are doing those critical thinking steps, what is happening? The process of being asked a question, the process of asking yourself questions for the next step in your dissertation is happening because you are controlling AI. What happens if you let AI control you and say, hey, tell me what Emily said in her dissertation? Well, it's going to tell you whatever large language model was loaded or whoever had used it in the past. It depends on what you use, right? Claude in particular, I found, seems to really be driven by the last 4 or 5 usages. Okay. And again, that's just what some of these young people I'm working with are telling me. So, okay, is that what you want to know? I mean, are you a follower? Not a lot of graduate students tend to be followers, and following your is only going to get you so far because the next time you log in won't be those same 4 or 5 fellas. It'll be whatever randos were in front of you, right? So it's really dangerous to get into this habit of not controlling exactly what you want, which is kind of the point of as we're doing this meal plan, which again is the end product. We want to be very much in control from the very beginning, and we probably shouldn't leap right into AI till we're pretty sure what we want to find out. So this idea of thinking in the meal plan, AI can be involved in the research, annotation, and drafting, but here's what needs to happen first. We need to figure out what we really want to learn. And this is important, and you won't think it is maybe right now. How much time you have in this session to do it. Because what I hear all the time is that people sit down and they had time and they burn 30 minutes and then their kids are going to be home in 30 minutes and they hear the car and they just grab it and go. I get it. You know how many things I've dried I shouldn't have dried because I just didn't have time to hang it up? It's that same impulse, right? And so we really want to make sure we're measured and controlled. And so for me, and Emily knows this because she laughs at me. So these are all my different little books that I have. Okay. So this is like my student ideas, notes, finances. And this is my AI book because I go through them so quickly and they're $1.25 at Walgreens in Washington. So they're probably $700 in California. I don't know. And then this is my notebook where I bring them all together and carry them around so I can ask people questions. But I've been doing this since 1998 when I was cutting off the Wikipedia things, right? My advice to you is just to find a method where you stay in control. And it may require getting one of these little things. I just got this at the Philadelphia Philosophical Society. So instead of buying a shot glass, you can buy a little pencil holder when you go someplace. And these colors all mean something. I don't know if you can see this. Remember, is anybody old enough to remember these things and you'd put them in your back pocket with your comb like in the 70s? See these different colors? And then I have these different colors and I have a pencil and then I have look at this thing. Fountain pen. You can get these for like $2.98. But why do I have all these different things? Because they mean different things. When I have an idea, it's a color coding system based on that meal plan. Main idea, you know me, it's going to be pink. Okay. Evidence is green because that's my money maker. Analysis is my original thought, and I'm a Tar Heel, so it's blue. And then link to the next idea is purple. Bloop, 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 bloop. I do the same thing when I put it on a piece of paper. I do it the same thing when I'm putting it in AI. I do the same thing over and over and over again. And here's the big piece. You know what I do when I read? I do the same thing. So when I go read Emily's dissertation, because you can't put it down, it's so darn good, you want to go in and grab her main idea, her evidence, her analysis, and her link so that when you cite it, you have that same control with your own ideas. If you will get in the habit, I don't care if AI collated it and annotated, bibbed it, and all those kind of things for you, every time you pick up and touch something, if you'll cipher it like Andy Griffin ciphered stuff, if you'll cipher it with the color code or whatever makes sense to you, you can get those little pens, these little pens, either on Amazon or at the Family Dollar or whatever you have, whatever makes sense for you. It doesn't cost a lot of money. If you will cipher it, you will find it just coming into your AI usage. I'm working on something where I believe my main idea is so and so. And I'm trying to find evidence that relates to comparing and contrasting so and so because I want to analyze the blah, 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 and I'd like to link it to Emily's dissertation. Okay, AI will give you something right quick there in seconds. And another pro tip while you're doing there, you can get all that. You can get Claude up to a certain amount for free or Gemini or GPT or whatever you want. There is no reason to be in a committed relationship with your AI. I mean, yeah, maybe you want to find one that's fun and name her Karen and say ugly things to her when you've had a bad day. And she'll say to you, I'm sorry, I don't respond to things like that. I've heard. Maybe you want to do that. But you also, you're fun and single and in academia. Have yourself some little out of town fun. Find more than one AI, but we want to get that meal plan cadence down. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, label each space where you used AI in the research process. And so that is the short answer to an impossible to answer question right now, April. You'll see if you find evidence that matters to you, put it in the meal plan, blah, blah, blah. But see that black part there, April, in the second paragraph? Then ask, Did I use AI to generate a research question to search for articles or to take notes on my readings? If so, track and note the usage. And if we can go on to the next slide, I think maybe you'll get an idea. Okay, and this is in the early stages. You know, when you if you can't get down to the Family Dollar today and whatever, you're in your early stages of how to use the meal plan, and you're having to go kind of primitive. See, here's my little thing. Cars are important to the American economy. How my own sentence started, where AI crafted it to improve. And Arun, this is really what you were talking about. If you use grammatology,
Yes,
and
yes.
I'll tell you, I what they joked about. I went to speech therapy when I was a child in the 70s in Western North Carolina because back then they said was not a native speaker. I spoke at the dialect of Appalachian English, and they coached me up because I can speak English completely without an accent, whatever you would desire. But I also talk like this when I'm around my people, right? So, there are a lot of people who speak different dialects in this country. There are people where I'm come from instead who say instead I should have already gone, they say I should have done ready went. And they graduate from high school saying that. There are a lot of ways to use English, and grammatology or other AI tools will fix that for you. But what we don't want, April, is for you to say, hey, AI, sit down and write me a paper about Emily's dissertation. And Dr. M taught me I need to compare and contrast and fling some stuff in from Julie and Terrence and Mark while you're in there and make it before 2025. Like, I'm not teaching you the questions to ask so that you can go in and say, do it for me. But can you say, April, hey, AI, go find me the 10 most recent articles published in the New Yorker about how cool the Stuttgart Ballet is, to get back to something we were talking about earlier, Emily. And if it pulls those up, okay. And then you can go on and say, hey, AI, summarize the articles that make any mention of the American Ballet Theater in relation to the Stuttgart Ballet. Well, gosh, you had to know a lot about ballet, didn't you, Emily? See, I know. To ask those questions of AI, right? Okay, who April got to my next question. But here's what happens. Maybe some of those things were really in the New Yorker and maybe they weren't. And so right now they're called hallucinations. Other people call them things that are naughty, and I'm not going to say in front of all my friends here because have you heard that, the nasty words people use for them? I don't think those are going to stick. But yes, you have hallucinations. And what is a hallucination? Well, AI doesn't have a heart and a soul. It has a large language model. And until you train it to stop filling in the holes with imagined things, that's what it does because it doesn't know the difference between up and down, black and white, day and night. So a hallucination is the source that's not real or that's not there. And how do those get generated? There's a lot of discussion about it. Sometimes they take Emily's source and goof it up and put my name in front of it. Sometimes they just make it up out of thin air. But more often than not, what they're finding from what I've read is that they find a pattern of what the title and the citation look like and repeat it in a pattern where there are articles missing. So that gets to the point of why you can't do it yourself. If you say, go find these articles on the Stuttgart Ballet and blah, 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 it is then incumbent upon me to go through and look at them and see which ones are real and which ones aren't. How much time have I saved so far when I could have just gone to the library where somebody already did all this stuff for me? I don't know, but everybody's fascinated with it. I mean, do I do this? I mean, if I'm out for a laugh with my girlfriends, maybe, and we're looking up, who's having a sale, maybe. But if I'm doing my own work, I mean, I personally, I'm an old war dog. It's, may not be apparent, but I am an old war dog. And for me, I don't see the benefits of going to AI because of the hallucinations. Because, I mean, if I knew all the stuff I had to ask you up front, I'd have just done it myself. Just go to the library where peers who have spent their lives on this stuff have looked it up, vetted it, put it into play. You get the idea. But by the same token, and this is how my grandmother got me to give my son a video game. If you don't learn to use it, you're going to be the one that doesn't get invited to the birthday parties and you're going to get left behind. So, April, to answer your question, I think you have to do a good bit of both because once you agree to come to graduate school, once you agree to live up to our standards, you have agreed to carry the banner of the knowledge in your field forward. And so, in my opinion, you've got to do your diligence and you've got to do both. What do you think about AI? To paraphrase something, could it be this similar? Well, what do I think about it? Well, I don't want AI to do that for me because and I didn't pay April, and we're not friends. She's just helping me out because she's a good person. What do I think about that? Can we blip on to the next slide? I think that when a professor asks you to paraphrase, and if y'all can peek at that while I'm talking, if a professor asks you to paraphrase, April, they're asking you for something very specific. If I ask you to quote something, I'm asking you to go hunt something. Do you know what I mean by that? But if I ask you to paraphrase something, I'm asking you to translate it. So if I say, Oye, ¿cómo va? And I say, do me a favor, Julie, and translate that, Julie can do a lot of things. Julie can say she wanted to change the subject. She can maybe know what it meant in Spanish. She can maybe say I was tying back to my little dance jokes with Emily. She can maybe say I was just trying to teach y'all a dance. She could do a lot of things because I asked her to translate some crazy stuff I did to kind of keep y'all interested. So Mark might have translated it completely differently. Marty might have translated it completely different in a completely differently in a completely different way. That's why I asked them to paraphrase it because I wanted to know what they took from it. So a quote's one thing. Go in and find quotes that matter to me. Tell me in your main idea what the quote's about and the analysis. Tell me why the quote matters. That's how the paragraph plan works for quotes. But April, I can't thank you enough for this question because paraphrase is different. And if you're APA graduate school writers, you only use that quote when you can't say it any better in a paraphrase, right? And why is that? Because it's a very specific act they're asking you to do. The paraphrase is the act of owning that knowledge and telling the field what it means in your own words. And if AI does that for you, is it your own words? If I say, do me a favor, Emily, and write this PowerPoint for me and put me some notes in there, am I teaching you Emily's PowerPoint or mine? And by the way, that's not what happened. I drove her crazy with my revisions. But if I say to you, Julie, do me a favor and make me a dip I got to take on Saturday, and I go up and say, can y'all believe how I cook? Back in the olden days, they called that stealing. Back in my group of girlfriends, they'd have called you a liar, and I don't mean Lyre. So to answer your question, can AI paraphrase for you? Yes, it can. Should it? Well, our policy is no. But I tell you something, April, I care about you because you cared enough about me to show up and ask the question. And so my answer to that is I want y'all to care enough about the sacrifices you're making and your own time and your own ideas to do your own paraphrases. AI is a machine. It's not coming for you or coming for your job. It's a thing. And as CBS showed us, we can make it better, our work with it, or we can make it worse. But it is not an answer. It is not a shortcut. It is the same thing as this thing. And I realize with 2 minutes left, what y'all do with it is up to you. Appreciate y'all listening to my little song and dance about it. Hope to see y'all again in the new year. Hope you'll use our writing tutors. Come to all Emily's session and hope you'll go out and do NU proud. I sure do appreciate the chance to be here with y'all. When she sends out the resources, you'll get all the slides, even the ones we didn't get to. You'll see the resources at the end, including some good and not so good ways to use AI at the end. Godspeed, and I'll see y'all on down the trail.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meredith, and everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day. It's always such a joy to have you come join us, Dr. Meredith, so I really appreciate you. If anyone has any other questions or needs any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me via email once I send you all of this material to the email you registered with. Until then, take care. Bye.